Welcome to the Armchair Fantasy Football Podcast. Here are your hosts, DJ Marcotte and John Soroyce. Enjoy the show.
Welcome back, John, to the Armchair Fantasy Football Podcast, along with all of our listeners. We are the Working Class Podcast in the Blue Collar Ballers, John and DJ. And it's 2020. So with every new year and with every year end brings year-end awards, John. And that's what we're going to talk about today. We're talking about the Armchair Awards. Several categories, about 9 categories that we've concocted here. And we've come up with the top 3 for each category. We have Fantasy MVP. We have Rookie of the Year. We have Biggest Bust. Biggest Breakout. We have, what else do we have, John? Team of the Year. So the
Fantasy Team of the Year.
Not fantasy team, but NFL team that provided the most fantasy output for fantasy players. We have the Flex Award. We have the Frank Gore Award. We have the Steal of the Year. And Most Underrated as well, John. All kinds of good stuff going on here. Are you ready to get into high gear? Or do you want to get some news done first?
No, let's kick it into high gear.
There's really not much news anyway, right? We could probably skip news today altogether. I should check right now, but I'm sure that the Jerry Jones saga and the Jason Garrett saga, that soap opera, is probably still ongoing, but I'll do a double check here. Yep, still nothing. Nothing coming out of Dallas on what's going on with the head coaching position there. Ron Rivera did officially get a 5-year deal over in Washington to coach the Redskins, which I think is a significant upgrade for them. We'll see how that goes. They still need a quarterback, so we'll see if Dwayne Haskins can make the step up or if maybe Alex Smith returns. We'll see what goes on there. The biggest thing I saw, John, was kind of looks like the Colts are publicly saying, we're probably going to move on from Eric Ebron, which kind of surprised me a little bit. I think he's probably the second or third most talented guy on that offense. What are your thoughts on that?
It's a surprising move that I'm guessing either they're going to draft a tight end, but I think they keep Doyle.
Yeah.
The other surprising part is Brissett may be gone as well.
Yeah, it looked like what did they say about Brissett? Basically, he needs to take the next step. The jury is out. Yeah. You guys all know that I am not an advocate for one Jacoby Brissett. I think he's a lifetime backup, and I think he exposed that with his play down the stretch this year. I still think Andrew Luck's coming back, but I'm not going to break that down quite yet.
They're eyeballing someone.
Who are they eyeballing?
Phillip Rivers.
Yeah, I did hear that. Yeah, I heard that Rivers was they were interested there, but I'm going to put together my whole thesis on why I think Andrew Luck's coming back, but that's going to have to wait for another episode, John. Anything else newsworthy going on?
Rashad Penny's torn ACL is worse than it was initially.
Well,
they cleaned up his knee more. It's not
right, and I don't think whatever it was didn't really extend the rehab time, but it's going to take basically the full length of time it typically does.
He may miss part of training camp.
He may not.
Not either. It says
my math tells me he might have a hard time being out there for week 1 in 2020, or this year, I guess I should say. But yeah, I'm a big Rashad Penny fan. Really talented kid. Not the best luck in the world, it would appear, whether he gets the opportunities. And then when he finally gets the opportunities, he gets hurt. When he's clearly outplaying the poor man's Rashad Penny, Chris Carson. So hopefully his rehab goes well and he can be on the rise because he's an excellent talent, an excellent player. So let's get to the awards, John. You want to start at the top or you want to start at the bottom? You want to start with the fantasy MVP or?
I feel like MVP is always done last. I feel like we start from the bottom.
All right. I'll let you kick it off.
So, obviously, we're going to do the last one first and the first one.
Yes, okay. We're going to go from 3 to 1.
So, The first award is the most underrated fantasy player of the year. And at number 3, Mark Ingram.
Yeah, man. Like, you and I were just talking. I was kind of negotiating with Dan Cookson in our League of Record. I acquired Odell Beckham to trade Odell Beckham to him, and he wants Leonard Fournette as well. And I already have my 4 keepers. I have Julio, I have Devontae Adams, I have Ezekiel Elliott, and I have George Kittle. So Leonard Fournette and Odell Beckham are only on my team to trade them for draft picks, basically. Spoiler alert. Pretty much do that every year. And he tried to throw Mark Ingram into the mix, and I'm like, yeah, no, dude. Nobody wants Mark Ingram in a keeper league, which is true. But when you look at his numbers, John, he had an excellent year. I thought he broke 1,000 yards. He clocked in at 1,018 yards, 10 touchdowns, and then 5 touchdowns through the air on 247 receiving yards. That's pretty good. And he averaged 5 yards a carry. He good. 15 touchdowns total. And that kind of jumped off the page.
That's with Lamar Jackson there too.
Right, definitely. And I think Jackson helps him, but Ingram definitely was. I mean, he could have been in our not our most underrated. He could have been in our fantasy MVP at a lower level. You know, you get a guy like that in the 4th or 5th round, and to produce at, you know, a top 10 level, basically. I think he was 11th overall. That's a nice little surprise. So Mark Ingram, number 3. Who's number 2?
Number 2, Captain Consistent. We always talk about it. Mr. Jarvis Landry.
I love Jarvis Landry. I've always loved Jarvis Landry. I mean, he's good for 80-plus receptions every year, John, and this year was no different with 83 receptions and 1,174 yards and 6 touchdowns. But that's what you get out of Jarvis. You get about 6 touchdowns every year, right? Yeah.
The receptions, I think, is a little lower than usual, but you remember he's also fending off Beckham there, who's supposed to be the number 1.
But he's not. Well, he is, but yeah.
He's a deep threat. But Landry still showing he's getting it done. Yardage, receptions, TDs.
Yep.
And he's never gets the, what's the word I want to use?
The praise, the respect.
Exactly.
This should be the Rodney Dangerfield Award. I think we might change it next year. But, yeah, he gets no respect. No respect at all.
No respect.
Yeah. So, number 1, John. We unanimously agreed on this. And this guy has earned his way into our hearts. Number 1, John, is
Devontae Parker.
No doubt. This is a feel-good story, John. Give me the stat line on Devontae.
Devontae Parker, ADP of 207, undrafted in most leagues, if not all.
Severely undrafted. Not even considered.
72 receptions for 1,202 receiving yards and 9 TDs. So as bad as Miami was, he was the star.
And if you look a little bit deeper into that, John, the one thing with Devontae Parker was, well, he couldn't just quite catch on as what we need him to be, a stud receiver. Well, he's just not very consistent. He pops every. You know what Devontae Parker has always been is Corey Davis, basically, is what he's always been. But if you look at his numbers this year, John, he's only had a handful of games, if that were in single digits. He played every game this year. He's balled out.
Yeah, and on top of that, that's also they were dealing with the 2 quarterback situation between Fitzmagic and Rosen there for a while. The inconsistency of a quarterback.
And I heard this big time, the number 1 podcast on Apple Podcasts, by the way, but I won't name them by name, who said that Devontae Parker was only good when Fitzpatrick rolled into town. Well, that's not true. He actually was pretty much, he had double-digit games in PPR, John, all but 3 games. Actually 4. He had a really bad game against New England where he goosed you. But other than that, he was really good, even with Josh Rosen out there. He got 17 PPR points in week 4, and then 15.1 in week 12. So that's the split. And he went upwards of 34 PPR points in week 13. He had 23 in week 15. He had 22 in week 16, and those are week-winning totals, John, as well as 20 in week 11 against Buffalo. He performed against New England in week 17 with 137 yards against Stephon Gilmore. So this guy really broke out this year.
He got better as the year went on.
But he was such a late breakout that we couldn't consider him that really a breakout because we've been waiting so long for it. But he definitely is the most underrated by far. And I think you'll see that carry in the next season, too. I think people are going to still sleep on Mr. Parker. Ready to get on to the next one?
Okay, next category. Steal of the Year.
Yeah, there was a few good players, several good players in this category. I mean, you could have considered Devontae Parker a steal of the year. Really, I mean, not to harp on Parker, but he kind of could have fell into several categories this year.
He could have, but we also had to do it based on not just ADP here, but overall production as well.
Yeah.
And the 3 we picked, I think, were, I'd say, really good. So number 3, we'll roll into this. And
DJ Chark. With the 80.
–
So we talk about Devontae Parker being a steal ADP at 207. DJ Chark was at 291.
I know, 291.
So you want to talk undrafted? That dude was undrafted in 16-team leagues. Like, he just
maybe even 20
wasn't even on the radar. And then to finish the season, John, was 73 receptions for 1,008 yards and 8 touchdowns. I mean, what a great year for DJ Chark. He performed with Gunter Minshew. He performed with Nick Foles. Like, it didn't matter who was out there. He was a little more inconsistent than I would have liked. But you're talking about a guy you picked up literally off the waiver wire.
And there was that week he was banged up, so we don't know if it tied into the other week. But overall, production for the year was really, really good.
Yeah, so if you were guessing who was going to be the number 1 wide receiver in Jacksonville, you probably didn't guess DJ Chark. But if you did, that was a jackpot for you. Loving DJ Chark. I think he's got bust potential next year, but we'll talk about that.
That's a different episode,
That's a different episode, yeah.
So at number 2 for Steal of the Year, Mark Andrews.
Yeah, man. This is my dog, even though I just traded him. I traded him and Emmanuel Sanders for Odell Beckham. Kind of took advantage of Beckham having a bad year. But the other guy got a great tight end. And a guy that I look at, John, Mark Andrews, as a guy that could be the number 1 ranked tight end by the end of 2020. He's that good. His ADP was 140. So people started to hear the buzz around him. So his ADP wasn't too horrible, but it was still late round pick. It was like 15th, 14th round pick. And he just has done everything that I predicted that he would do. I said that this was going to be a breakout year for this guy. And it's not just Lamar Jackson either, because last year he performed well with Flacco. He had his yards per route run were just as high with Flacco as they were with Lamar Jackson. And he carried that into this season with just an incredible year for a guy that's only, I think, second year in the league, right, John?
Yes. Can you imagine if Hayden Hurst was not there?
It would be even higher, but 64.
You'd have gotten that 1,000 yards.
No doubt. 64 receptions, 852 yards, and 10 touchdowns. 10 touchdowns alone you're happy with that. But,
double-digit touchdowns all day long.
And he had some big weeks too. So Mark Andrews is great. But number 1, John, the steal of the year is a without question. Tell me who it is.
Cue up the music.
I can't.
Oh, okay. So, steal of the year, if you haven't already guessed, Lamar Jackson.
It is. There you go. It is Lamar Jackson. He is for real. This might not be the last time you hear this music. And yes, we know this music makes no sense because he's saying, "I'm sorry, Miss Jackson." So it's actually as if he were to be apologizing to Lamar Jackson's mom. But the dude's name is in there, and it's a fun song. So get over it. But yeah, Lamar Jackson, dude. Like, what? Who could have predicted this? I think people looked at him with upside. I looked at Josh Allen with similar upside, but I had concerns about both of these guys in their throwing ability and their ability to throw accurate passes. And I think part of that is Lamar definitely stepped up, but the other part of it is that Baltimore just really utilizes him to his strengths, and they really truly build that offense around him rather than try to get him to do things that he's just not really tailored to. And they were rewarded with just a huge stat line, 3,127 yards, 36 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, which is nothing, and then 1,200 rushing yards, John, 1,206 rushing yards from a running back. See, Freudian slip, because he's actually a quarterback, but, I mean, if you're running back, he's a top 10 running back, John.
That's a number 1 running back on most teams right there. And
his ADP was 106.
And on top of that, 7 rushing touchdowns for a total of 43 touchdowns this year. And as a runner, he averaged 6.9 yards a carry and broke Mike Vick's single-season record,
He did, yep. So just Lamar Jackson, just the man this year. He did not win our fantasy MVP award, but for good reason. He was pretty darn close, and he's definitely the steal of the year this year. What about the Frank the Tank Award, John?
Frank the Tank Gore Award.
The Frank Gore Memorial. Well, not memorial.
It's not dead yet.
And he never will be. That guy just will not die. And that's kind of what we base this award on. Those old dogs that can still go out there and get it done. Frank Gore's still out there. He just can't get it done anymore. But there are guys like him that just keep chugging along. I mean, we look at Tom Brady. He's 42 years old. It's amazing that he's out there, but he's not the same guy. But these guys are still performing at a level that they have throughout their career, and in some cases, a higher level than they have in the past. And number 3 is the epitome of that. He's performed this year, and when he was in Oakland, he seems to get better as he gets older. He seems like a fine wine, John. Jared Cook seems to get better with age. 43 receptions, not a huge reception count, but 705 yards, and of course 9 touchdowns. And down the stretch, really a favorite target of Drew Brees. Where are you at on Mr. Jared Cook?
Jared Cook in a solid year, and this is Mr. Drew Brees missing 5 games as well. So for Jared Cook to put up these numbers without their star quarterback, Bridgewater did do a great job of filling in, but Jared Cook putting up solid numbers in a year where they didn't have their number 1 QB.
And Jared Cook's been around since 2009, dude. Like he's the
vintage wine.
He is literally aging like a fine wine. So he clocks in there at number 3 for the Frank Gore Award, the Frank Gore Non-Memorial Award.
It'll change the Memorial Award as soon as he passes away.
Yeah,
But we don't
want that to happen. So number 2, this guy is another dude that I mean he's a slot machine. He's a PPR monster, and he amazingly. I keep telling you guys that he's gonna get hurt. He can't handle the punishment that he gets out there. And eventually he's going to hit the wall, but he hasn't yet, and it's Julian Edelman. 100 receptions, again, 1,017 yards, and 6 touchdowns. Jules had a great year this year, and he's, 33 years old, and he gets pounded constantly, and he just keeps showing up and performing at a high level. Julian Edelman's, I mean, he's what you want if you're an NFL coach. He's what you want on your team, a guy like that shows true grit. And being a Patriots fan, John, I'm sure you don't disagree with that.
No, even reports we're reading this week, Edelman was banged up, but it looks like all systems go for the playoffs against the Titans. That's Edelman for you. Everything.
He and Welker are so similar, dude. Yeah. It's unreal.
And it was funny because when we lost Welker, we're like, oh no, what are we going to do? And then Edelman stepped right up and filled that role immediately. So it's...
And you saw signs of it when Welker was still the main slot receiver there. You saw flashes of it from Edelman, and boy, has he... I mean... I don't see how he's not a Hall of Famer, dude, when it's all said and done. I really don't. And he doesn't look like he's slowing down anytime soon.
Speaking of not slowing down,
man.
Our number 1.
This dude's been around since 2001. That year I could legally drink alcohol.
So this guy is an oldie but a goldie. And if you haven't guessed who it is, it's Mr. Drew Brees.
Yeah, the undeniable geriatric ability of Drew Brees, I guess you would call it. The guy just keeps going, man. And he's got only a tick behind Brady in terms of age. I mean, they're pretty much the same age, and he just keeps it going. And he might have a Super Bowl ring to throw on the mantle this year, John. I know you're a big fan of Brees. I kind of predicted his downfall, but he's really gone in the other direction, hasn't he?
Missing 5 games on 11 games, 2,979 passing yards, 27 TDs, 4 interceptions, and a rushing touchdown. Yeah. So 28 touchdowns in 11 games. That's almost that's a 2.8 yard average. 2.8 average of touchdowns.
It's good. And the one thing I would say, and I don't want to rain on the parade here, but his yardage, I mean, he didn't hit 3,000. So that was a little low, but he definitely doesn't have the deep ball anymore. And I think that's why, traditionally you would see guys like Ted Ginn or Traquan Smith really thrive in this offense. And that seems to be taken away from his game, whether it be he just can't throw deep anymore or it's just not part of the offensive scheme. But he has Shock T, Michael Thomas there. So it doesn't really matter. So it's just those guys just had a great year together this year, and congratulations, Drew Brees, on winning the Frank Gore Award.
Okay,
ready to flex?
Next category, the Flex Award. Flex Award, best running back / wide receiver / tight end.
So it's not exactly best of those positions combined. It's where you drafted these guys, what their ADP was, and those were the guys that you could put in your flex every week and know that you were going to get a good output and you were going to be really happy with the results. That's what the Flex Award is all about. So, with that being said, John, who clocked in at number 3 on
Number
our Flex
3,
Award?
Marvin Jones Jr.
This was a tie, actually. This was Marvin Jones Jr. and Michael Gallup. We could not decide on the two, so we went with both of them. And yes, we can do that because these are our awards. But yeah, let's first talk about Marvin Jones. John.
Marvin Jones Jr. had an ADP of 93. He only played 13 games, and this is with 2 different quarterbacks, one being Blau. And also, he had 62 receptions, 779 yards, and 9 TDs. So, with 2 different quarterbacks, obviously, and kind of banged up near the end, being put on.
Yeah, he did get hurt, got put on IR, but we had him in our tag team league, John, and he was just also an underrated guy. Doesn't get enough respect. He was just Mr. Consistent double digits for us every week.
If it was 12 or it was 18, he was always getting us double digits.
And we, John and I only lost, I think, two weeks this year, and it was to the same guy, coincidentally. And Marvin Jones was a big part of that. Michael Gallup, on the other hand, John, in 2018, it seemed like Dallas was testing him as a wide receiver 1, and he just isn't, or at least wasn't at the time. He was a rookie, still kind of getting his feet wet in the NFL. And then they went and got Amari Cooper, and you started to see that Gallup was really fitting into his role a lot better. And this year, he has just completely blossomed. I know you're a big Michael Gallup guy. Don't you have him in our keeper league, our league of record?
Oh, I wish I did.
Oh, no, that's Ernie
I tried to,
right?
Yep. He sniped him.
But Michael Gallup, he had, let's see, just probably about 5 games in single digits this year in PPR. He had 32 points in Week 17 against Washington. I mean, right out of the gate, Week 1, you were happy with what you were seeing, 22 points against the Giants. Week 5, he had 24 points against Green Bay. Missed a few games this year, John, but this guy was that perfect flex guy that you knew you were going to get 10 points or more.
Yeah. So
and only a few bust games.
Gallup in 14 games, 66 receptions for 1107 receiving yards and 6 TDs. Not bad for a second-year kid.
No, and I think this guy, Michael Gallup, and at least until I hear about what's going on with the head coaching situation in Dallas, I am a Cowboys fan, so maybe I'm being a homer, but Michael Gallup's going into that 3rd year, John. So the sky is the limit for him. I think he's just going to explode further. But,
and he could explode further depending on what happens to Mr. Amari Cooper as well.
Yeah. So as much as I want to gush on Michael Gallup, we'll move on to number 2 in this category, the Flex Award. It's Allen Robinson, man. I was very envious of Allen Robinson owners this year because the guy was a steal. His ADP was 77, and he almost hit 100 yards. 100 receptions this year. 98 receptions. 1,147 yards, and of course 7 touchdowns. This was another one of those guys, John, that was just Mr. Consistency.
Yeah, you would sit there and be like, oh, Trubisky's awful, this team's awful offensively. But at the end of the day, the stat line for Allen Robinson, he was the number 1 receiver.
He was the rose that grew from concrete.
Yeah, and you look and you're like, wow, there's a shining star on this team.
Yeah.
And it was Allen Robinson. Every week, 8 receptions, 70 yards, or another week he had 12 targets, 9 receptions, 90 yards. The guy had a great year. Yeah. And he was always, I think maybe a couple weeks he had a couple single digit numbers, but overall.
Well, let me ask you this. We started to see, and Anthony Miller is an immense talent. For those of you that don't know and think that he's just a guy, he is not. He's an immense talent. Do you think that Allen Robinson can keep this up next year, given that the dumb Bears have said that they are sticking with Mitch Trubisky for the 2020 season? Are you a little afraid of, kind of the rise of Anthony Miller, and with Mitch Trubisky around, is that kind of leading to a fall of Allen Robinson?
No, they just fired their offensive coordinator, so I'm interested to see what this new coordinator brings to the table. Yeah. And who he involves, if he's no more as a slot guy or more of a flanker guy. That I got to see first, but I like his production, and I'm going to keep an eye on it.
3 games in single digits in PPR this year. That's 16. Consistency.
Yes.
Yep, that's awesome. All right. Number one, who could be a better guy to throw in your flex? Especially you drafted him number 67 overall based on ADP, and he's a number one wide receiver with 87 receptions, 1,175 yards, and 4 touchdowns. And that's my namesake, or I'm his namesake, or I don't know. It's DJ Moore. I love this kid, dude. And he has not even tapped his potential yet, I don't think.
I don't think so either. And on top of that, how many times did he make our start list? I think it was every week.
Pretty much every week. You just start DJ Moore.
And another one who they dealt with 3 different quarterbacks this year.
They did. And none of them were any good. But hopefully they can fix that for next season. But that speaks to how good DJ Moore is as a fantasy asset, John. You don't get much worse than the quarterback situation in Carolina this season, and he still got it done. That's how good DJ Moore is. He and Christian McCaffrey, who we might talk about a little bit later, those guys were the constants on that team. And if they can get a quarterback, or if they keep Cam and he's healthy, I mean, this guy's upside is even higher than it was this year. I love DJ Moore. All right, what's next on the list,
Okay,
John?
next award is Fantasy NFL Team of the Year.
All right, the team that gave us the most fantasy stars, studs, moments, and all that stuff in between.
Or surprised us as well.
Surprised us. There's a lot of things that John and I looked at when we kind of picked these two teams. And yes, it was total points, but there was more to it than that. It was all about the season and the teams that benefited fantasy owners most, I guess is the best way to put that. So where do we start with them?
Number 4, San Francisco 49ers.
All right. Explain.
This team had George Kittle, Jimmy G, Tevin Coleman, Matt Breida, Raheem
I wonder if
Mostert.
I didn't say anything, how long that silence would have gone for.
The trade of Emmanuel Sanders. This team did everything it could offensively to add more depth, utilize people that aren't like stars other than like Kittle, and Shanahan shows that he got it done. I mean, George Kittle missed 2 games, broken pieces of bone in his ankle. The guy put up 85 receptions for 1,053 receiving yards and 5 TDs.
Yeah,
you have Deebo Samuel.
As I call it, the rise of Deebo Samuel.
The rise of Deebo Samuel. The guy has showed the last, 4 or 5 weeks that he's someone to be reckoned with next year. I mean, he's only a rookie. I mean, he just popped off the page. Last week against Seattle, he had 5 receptions for 102 yards. And it's just not that. You just look at him. He can run. He can end arounds. The kid is just so talented. And this isn't even counting the depth they also have on their bench as well, as Jalen Hurd in that.
Yep.
Emmanuel Sanders did well filling in. They're a 3-headed monster in the backfield, but they all produced in their own way in different aspects.
These are the things that I think about when I think of the 49ers. I think of that huge game from Tevin Coleman in week 8 where he gave you 37.8 points and won you the week. Yeah, he didn't really do anything else for the rest of the year, but that was such a huge talking point. We thought that he had taken over the lead role there, and he didn't. As I say, the rise of Deebo Samuel, the rebirth of Emmanuel Sanders when he was left for dead in Denver and then came to San Francisco and has just really recreated himself as a top receiver. The hostile takeover of the backfield of Raheem Mostert, who said, I'm taking this job and there's nothing you guys can do about it. And, of course, just the fun and excitement of George Kittle. Those are the things that make fantasy fun and get you a ton of points while you're at it.
But at the same time, this team, there was no friction as the players changed roles, too. Like, the beginning of the year was Matt Breida and Tevin Coleman. And then you would see Raheem Mostert sneak in there for a goal line TD. At the end of the year, it ends up being Mostert's backfield.
Right, yeah.
And it's just weird how
it's just exciting.
Yeah.
It's
exciting. This offense still just kept clicking all the way through. And it showed because they're one of the top offenses in the league.
But they weren't as exciting as the number 1 team. But we'll move on to the next team.
Number 3, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Yeah. So, again, it's all about fantasy output, points, but it's about storylines, too. It's about finally Chris Godwin breaking out and becoming an elite receiver. And that's what he was this year. I don't know if you have the stat line for Godwin, John.
Yeah, Chris Godwin only played 14 games, 121 targets, 86 receptions, 1,333 receiving yards, and 9 TDs. He smashes the year before playing 2 less games and on 30 more targets, 30 more receptions as well. So third-year breakout myth is true.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't think it's a myth anymore, but yeah, Chris Godwin, man, like last year I thought it was going to be the breakout year, and it wasn't quite yet for whatever reason, and I think the coaching staff hadn't quite bought into him. And the second that Bruce Arians showed up for work in Tampa, he's like, this kid is good. This kid is really good. And he did all that, John, with some dude by the name of Mike Evans being on the other side of the field. And he pretty good too.
And what's funny is Mike Evans only played 13 games. This is his lowest ever in his career, in his 6-year career. Injury, obviously.
Yep.
But on top of that, guess what? Another year of high targets. This is his lowest so far, 118. 67 receptions for 1,157 yards and 8 TDs. Guys, he's never had less than 1,000 receiving yards. Not even his rookie year. So every year has been over 1,000.
He's a little more inconsistent than Godwin is, but he's still a stud. So all that is great. But then both those guys got hurt, right? We lost both those guys. Yep. Not we necessarily, but the fantasy community was without Chris Godwin and Mike Evans when it mattered most by the end of the season. So then what happens? All falls apart, right? Nope. The bust of the century, Brashad Perriman, is a fantasy asset all of a sudden and a fantasy stud. In week 15, he had 29.6 points. In week 16, he had 10.2 points. Week 14, he had 13 points. And, of course, if you play in week 17, if you have championships in week 17, he gave you 19.4. So he was a huge asset in the fantasy playoffs when you thought you were done for if you lost Chris Godwin or Mike Evans. Well, if you snatched up Brashad Perriman off the waiver wire, you didn't miss a beat.
Nope.
So then there's the elephant in the room. Well, first of all, their running game is trash, but Ronald Jones was a little bit better this year. But the elephant in the room is they got to make a 30 for 30 for Jameis Winston for obvious reasons. The 30 interception, 30 touchdown narrative.
There is another 30 because you know what he's asking for QB
30
money?
million?
30 million.
That's not bad for a quarterback, but anyway, Jameis Winston was, it's funny because he had a really bad week 16, I believe, and you may have that in front of you or you may not, but Jameis was a fantasy stud for most of the season, John. I remember getting a text from our buddy Dan, and he's like, Jameis Winston's a fantasy stud. And I'm like, I don't know about that. And then I looked at his numbers, I'm like, well, he kind of is. And then that all blew up in Dan's face when he had a crumb week the next week. But by and large, Winston, despite the interceptions, was huge this year.
Yeah, he had actually, if I'm looking at this right, 3 games over 400 yards. And then on top of that, he had 8 games of over 300.
Yeah, man. Jameis is, if he had the intellect of a Pat Mahomes, he would be lethal. He would be, and he even said, if I didn't throw so many interceptions, I'd be an elite quarterback. Nice observation, Jameis. But
Captain Obvious.
But in fantasy, he had elite numbers, and I haven't looked at the official tally, but he probably is going to clock in at a top 5 quarterback this year.
If you took away all those turnovers and interceptions, he would have easily been up there with Lamar. He actually might even beat Lamar.
But unfortunately, you can't do that.
Nope.
But he had over 5,000 yards passing this year. That's huge. You get to that number, you're that. And another thing too, before we move on to the next one, John, this is the second year in a row that Tampa has been among the highest passing teams in the league in terms of passing offense. So, what's
Something
next?
To think about next year. Number 2, the Dallas Cowboys.
How about them Cowboys?
This is with Garrett too.
This is with Garrett, but it's part of it. Garrett is a big part of why they have so many fantasy studs, because they're always having to catch up because they're always underperforming. And I would be curious, and maybe we'll break this down in another time, how many fantasy points for this team came in the fourth quarter?
A lot.
I would say a lot. But yeah, give me some examples of some fantasy studs.
We already went to with Michael Gallup, but
Yeah.
This is one thing, you guys, I don't know if you realize this. I noticed this number when we were breaking down stats and everything. So Michael Gallup, like I said, 66 receptions, 1107 receiving yards, 6 TDs in 14 games. Guess who played 16 games? Amari Cooper. 79 receptions for 1189, 8 TDs. So this team's basically got 2 number ones, I think, personally.
Yeah, definitely.
Kind
of similar to Tampa.
Yeah, Amari's got Amari Cooper's their number 1 overall, but Let's be honest. There's like having two number ones here.
And then you got Elliott in a quote-unquote disappointing season. He had 1,357 yards rushing. He had 12 touchdowns, 2 receiving touchdowns. So he had 12 rushing, 2 receiving, 14 total, 54 receptions for 420 receiving yards. So everybody talks about how disappointing the season was for Elliott. That's an elite running back, right?
Yeah, I don't think
in a quote-unquote bad year.
I don't think this was a bad year. I think what it is, everybody saw... You're used to thinking Elliott's going to put up 35 points a game because he has that potential. This isn't untapped yet.
Right.
That's what I think. I think this is his floor. He can actually put up more than this if this offense
this
corrected.
is definitely not what he can do at his peak performance.
And another big reason for this success is Dak Prescott does not get the credit he deserves. 4,902 passing yards, 30 TDs, 11 interceptions, and another 3 rushing touchdowns go with that.
Yeah, in the fantasy world, you have to separate the ability of a team to win NFL football games from the ability to win you weeks in fantasy football. And the Dallas Cowboys definitely did that. Zeke, only 1 game this year in single digits. I mean, that's what you want from your stud running back. What about number 1, John?
Number 1, this one's obvious if you haven't already guessed it. The Baltimore Ravens, led by Mr. Lamar Jackson, which we went into his stats. I'll just read the big stat. 43 overall touchdowns, 1,206 rushing yards, and over 3,100 passing yards. Mark Andrews, who we already mentioned before, 10 TDs. And on top of that, Mr. Mark Ingram, 15 TDs. This doesn't even count Marquise Brown popping off here and there.
Yeah.
In between. So.
These guys were exciting to watch. For me, it was close because I feel like Dallas gave us more fantasy studs. But just the Lamar Jackson aspect, a stud tight end like Mark Andrews, the revival of Mark Ingram.
But teams always said, hey, we're going to focus on Lamar Jackson. Didn't work because when they did, they got burned by Ingram. When they focused on Ingram or Hollywood Brown, Lamar Jackson would burn them. I watched a lot of Ravens games this year, and I don't know if you've seen him fake the ball. He is so good at it. At handing off a fake. And I'm like, does he have it or does the other guy?
The teams are scared already. So.
And this team's scary. They're scary good on offense, and the fact that they say he can't throw, they've tailored this offense around him that he doesn't need to throw this deep ball. He throws 10, 15 yards, and his players are just making plays out of it. He's making plays. Just fantastic offense to watch this year. It's like watching Kansas City last year.
Yeah, definitely. All right, we're going to move on to the next award, John. It is the biggest breakout award.
I don't even like Drake. You don't like the Drake?
I hate the Drake.
I love the Drake.
How could you not like the Drake?
Who's the Drake?
Who's the Drake?
Drake is good.
Drake is really good. If you look at Kenyon Drake's season this year, John, it definitely, I know it's cliche to say, but it is a tale of 2 seasons. Kenyon Drake, for whatever reason, John, just never got the love in Miami. Those guys never looked at Kenyon Drake as a stud running back. And I always thought, had he been given consistent opportunity in that role, I thought he could truly shine. But for whatever reason, Miami did not see it. And then the trade deadline came around. And then Kenyon Drake got traded to the Arizona Cardinals. And the Arizona Cardinals loved their new what would it be called? I guess it would be called a crush. Their new crush so much that they dumped their current girlfriend, David Johnson, and gave all the love to Kenyon Drake. And he gave all that love right back. What a season for Kenyon Drake. And this is another one of those feel-good moments, John. Since he got to Arizona, 28 points, 10 points, 14 points. He had a couple rough weeks, 7 and 9. And then he just ramped it up even more. 39 points against Cleveland in Week 15, 33 points against Seattle in Week 16, and 17 points against the Rams in Week 17. This guy had 6 touchdowns in 2 games, John. And he shoved David Johnson aside and never looked back. Talk about a breakout.
I'm still crying about it. I had David Johnson. I didn't have Drake.
I mean, he had 817 yards rushing, John, 8 touchdowns, as we alluded to. 6 of them were in 2 games. 50 receptions for 345 yards, which is a great receiving stat line for a running back. Yeah, what more could you ask for from Kenyon Drake this year? And he's going to be probably going pretty early in fantasy drafts next year. Do you think there's some potential for bust here, or do you think Kenyon Drake stays the course? They obviously believe in him in that offense.
I think there's a potential to bust here. All those touchdowns in 2 games, he may not even do it. Or he could add on more.
Yeah, David Johnson could be gone altogether, which I think is what's going to happen. I think he's going to be cut by Arizona. I think he's going to, or get traded, potentially, to Tampa Bay. And I think Kenyon Drake is, sky's the limit from here on out. Next up is we could have called this the Jake Cookson Award. Austin Hooper truly broke out this year, and I will fully admit that I did not see this coming, John. 75 receptions, 787 yards, 6 touchdowns in just 13 games. So he had the potential for an even bigger break.
I think he possibly could have hit 1,000 here if it wasn't for that injury.
And you're saying he's a free agent this year. I don't know how accurate that is, but I'll take your word for it. So maybe it's kind of like baseball when a guy knows he's coming up on a contract year and he tries really hard. Maybe that's what was happening this year, but you got to give the devil his due. And definitely Austin Hooper tore it up this year. What do you think his potential is to do that again next year?
I think
will he be in Atlanta, I guess?
The question is, if he's in Atlanta, I think he can duplicate these numbers. They seem to believe in him. His numbers just got better every season since he's been there. I mean, first year was a little rough. His rookie season, only 19 receptions, but he got utilized.
He has not been good until this year. Really, truly good.
Well, no, truly good was this year. The year before, he had 71 receptions in 16 games.
But he was very inconsistent.
Yes, this year, more consistency. He saw the targets more. So I just see his growth here. Atlanta has not used a tight end since it had Tony Gonzalez.
Not consistently, no.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I think he has that chance to be their Tony Gonzalez again. I'm not saying that level, but you know what I'm saying?
Right.
To be their Tony Gonzalez, their go-to guy at tight end. I think they're going to try to re-sign him. I don't think he walks in free agency. And at number 1 is...
Who else, John? Mr. 3000 ADP himself. You ready? You gonna sing it for me?
DJ Chark, do. DJ Chark.
That was awful.
I don't have the cartoon voice.
No, you do. Do it with that weird voice that you do all the time.
DJ Chark.
All right, that's enough. DJ Chark, number 1 in our hearts, and number 1 in this category for biggest breakout,
and
John.
ADP 291.
And that's a big part of why. This guy was so far off there. He was in the outer rim, as they say in Star Wars, and now he's right there in the big time, flying the Millennium Falcon through every week of fantasy. He was great this year, like we alluded to, 73 receptions, 1,008 yards, and 8 touchdowns. And like we said before, we won't harp on him too much because we have discussed him earlier, but he did it with multiple crappy quarterbacks. So congratulations, DJ Chark, on being the biggest breakout. John, you have anything to add?
And that was also with a moron for a coach.
Yes, and apparently he's still going to have that moron as a coach because the dumb Jaguars have decided to stick with
Hey, we're going to fire
Doug
you and then we're going to
Moron.
bring you back.
Yeah.
I don't understand.
By the way,
that
you're
one.
fired after this game, but maybe not. So we'll see how it goes.
I don't even know.
This is why bad. I don't know. You're gonna get me on a rant here. This is why bad teams stay bad.
I
John.
agree with you 100%.
The Chicago Bears. Mitch Trubisky. Let's have him as our quarterback.
You know why they're keeping him?
Because he's an idiot.
They don't want to look
And they're
stupid
idiots.
that they drafted him before.
So they're gonna
Patrick
they're gonna
Mahomes
look
and Deshaun
stupid
Watson.
by keeping him around another year, and Jacksonville's gonna look stupid with keeping Doug Moron around another year. But this is about DJ Chark. This is good stuff, and DJ Chark is our breakout of the year.
Now we go into
We're gonna go a little more negative on this
biggest
one,
bust
right? Yeah.
of the year.
Yeah, I am sad to say. So there's good news and there's bad news here. The bad news is David Johnson did not take the top prize in this category, but he is on the list. He is our number 3 biggest disappointment, biggest bust this year. 345 yards, 2 touchdowns, 36 receptions, and 4 receiving touchdowns. So not too bad, but this was over a span of 13 games. John, David Johnson, I'm sure you well know this, had 7.2 carries a game this year. That is like Dion Lewis numbers right there.
Oh, all I saw was the .2.
Yeah.
Because that's how bad he was to me.
Last year, so because of the magic of editing, you guys can't tell, but I'm going to call myself out anyway. John had to stop the recording because I continuously repeated myself and stumbled over myself.
He sounded like...
For a good solid 60 seconds there. And I'm like, can you just cut this, please?
He sounded like Porky Pig when he goes...
That's all, folks.
And that was all for David Johnson as well. He had 16 carries a game last year, John. 18 carries a game in his best year just a few years ago. And then this past year, as I said, 7.2 carries a game. They just completely, for whatever reason, lost faith in him. He had 3.6 targets a game in the passing game this year and 4.75 last year, so not a huge drop-off there. But the carries, he's not their guy anymore. And that's why I think he's going to get cut or traded.
And those are averages, too. So if you actually looked at the game's stats...
Don't look, though. If you look with, like, those glasses that you have to
Beer
look
goggles.
at the Eclipse glasses. Like, if you're looking at the Eclipse. Because if you look at David Johnson's individual games too closely, you could burn your eyes out.
Yeah,
It's a possibility.
take binoculars and use them backwards. That's how you want to read his stats.
Yeah.
Because literally, the averages make it sound better than what it is. Yes,
Right.
it still went down, but there was literally games near the end, like 2 carries.
Yeah.
So that's why...
In the
such a
targets
disappointment this
too.
year.
Yeah, so the next one on the list here for the biggest bust, John was like pounding the table. He's like, Adam Thielen's the biggest bust. And he kind of really wasn't, because the first half of the year...
I think I'm just mad because he lost us our
you
playoffs.
are getting emotional about it because he was in our...
And personal.
We traded to get him in our tag team league to bolster the can't-beat roster that we had. And then Adam Thielen screwed it all up for us. He had a good start to the season, not bad, despite... I don't know if people remember, but Minnesota, all they did was run the ball in the first part of the year. And Adam Thielen was still giving you some decent stat lines there. But then he got hurt. Then he had the hamstring injury. And he just wasn't the same guy from that point on. And Adam Thielen's right around 30 years old. So I wonder if the decline's here. But to give you his stat line, 30 receptions, 470 yards, 6 touchdowns in 10 games. So the touchdowns weren't that bad. But where Adam Thielen killed you, John, was down the stretch. And that was the worst part about it. He was just a non-factor the second half of the season.
After week 7, the wheels fell off. And
Right.
even coming back from injury, the wheels still fell off because his first game back after injury, or try the first attempt, he had 1 target out that game against Kansas City back in week 9. Week 15, he comes back, or supposedly healthy, 3 receptions, 3 targets for 27 yards, and that's it. And then the week after, he gets 4 targets, no receptions. The man just disappeared after week 7.
Yeah. Bad news. Number 1, biggest bust. Easy. This one's easy. I pumped the tires on this guy so much, and he just shoved it right up my boop. It is Screw Jew Smith-Schuster. No longer Juju Smith-Schuster. It's like when Anakin Skywalker became Darth Vader. Juju Smith-Schuster has become that level of evil, and I don't know if he can redeem himself. Screw Jew Smith-Schuster is definitely the biggest bust this year. 43 receptions for 552 yards, 3 touchdowns in 12 games. It's awful. It's embarrassing. It is clear to me, John, that this guy is not an elite wide receiver and that his success may be largely based on Ben Roethlisberger. Do you think that's the case?
He needs a better quarterback, period. I'm not saying...
But let me ask you a question. This is why I'm going to say, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, but this is why I'm going to say I don't think he's elite. Because has it ever mattered for Mike Evans?
No.
Has it ever mattered for DeAndre Hopkins?
No.
Has it ever mattered for Julian Edelman when Brady was out?
Nope.
No. These guys are elite talent. And I just don't think Juju is, but he's very young too.
But he also got exposed because of this. This is what helps you recognize an elite player, guys, is when you have those wide receivers like a DeAndre, as bad as a season as they have, they perform even better. Like Smith-Schuster just disappeared this year and showed that he can't be dependent on no matter who. Well, I shouldn't say no matter the quarterback, but people like DeAndre Hopkins have had played with Brock Osweiler and still had a decent season.
Yeah.
Juju did not.
We'll go back to Demaryius Thomas with Tim Tebow. He was still good.
Yes.
And people want to pick on Odell Beckham this year, John. But if you look at, how bad was Baker Mayfield this year, John? Do you think Baker Mayfield had what you would consider a horrible season this year? I'd probably put him up in that category.
He's probably at a 32. Sorry, if we had to rank 32 quarterbacks, he's probably number 30.
And Odell still only had 4 games in single digits because Odell is an elite receiver. He's an elite talent. So got a lot of concerns about Juju moving forward. Hopefully he can bounce back with Big Ben. But, man, when Big Ben goes out, it gets ugly. But Mason Rudolph is about the worst quarterback I've ever seen in my life. And Duck Hodges isn't too far behind him. So we'll move on to more positive things, right, Johnny boy?
Last 2 categories are very positive. Fantasy Rookie of the Year.
Rookie of the Year. Number 3 on our list, and a guy that I was really high on coming into this year was Miles Sanders. In his rookie season, Miles had 818 yards and 3 touchdowns. But even more impressive, John, 50 receptions for 509 yards and 3 receiving touchdowns. And that was with sharing the backfield the whole season. Until right about the end where he really started to get some more play and gained a lot more momentum. So I love the outlook for Miles Sanders next year. What say you?
I think if they get Jordan Howard goes, I think this proves that they don't need Jordan Howard. He did very well at the beginning, but
He played well this year too, yeah.
He did until he got hurt.
He was actually a nice little surprise as well.
And Miles Sanders shows that he has that ability, not just return the ball, but when he was involved more, we saw the capability that this kid has. And I'm really thinking, I think next year their backfield, in my opinion, Jordan Howard won't be there. I think it'll be Boston Scott, Miles Sanders, and Miles Sanders will be the lead back, and Boston Scott will be the change of pace back.
I like Miles Sanders a lot this year. All right, number 2 on the list for Rookie of the Year, the runner-up, A.J. Brown from Tennessee, 52 receptions, on 84 targets, so I would have liked to seen a little bit more consistency there, but he did break 1,000 yards, 1,051 yards, and 8 touchdowns, John, for a rookie. That's a great number. If you have a receiver that's getting you 10, you're really, really happy with that, and he was just on the cusp of that. And not as consistent as you would like, but I think that had more to do with the scheme and the quarterback play. That's the only thing that makes me a little nervous about this team is sometimes they kind of abandon guys if they're getting doubled or if they look at better, if they see better matchups. I think Tannehill is good, but I think part of his success is because if he thinks it's a bad matchup, he just doesn't go that way because he doesn't take the risks that the elite guys like Mahomes will. But with that being said, A.J. Brown, John, is an immense talent. We talked about this last offseason. This kid is an elite talent, and he started to show that already in his rookie season. Imagine what he'll be like in his second or third year.
He reminds me of, or vice versa, they kind of remind me of each other. He reminds me of Deebo Samuel, the ability to not only just catch the ball, but run the ball. He also had a rushing touchdown this year for 49 yards. They didn't use him a lot in the running game, only 3 attempts, but for 60 yards.
Yeah.
That's kind of scary.
I love Deebo
So
Samuel, by the way.
I think A.J. Brown, his future going forward does look better because, for one, you have King Henry there, who's absolutely burned me to the trenches, but that's fine. We'll talk about it.
We probably did him a disservice by not having him in some of these categories, but John hates him, so he doesn't really want to talk about him.
He burned me bad, guys. Yeah. But no, A.J. Brown, this kid, I think as long as they keep Tannehill there, I think he's got a bright future. And it's not even just Tannehill. He's just an immense talent. So I think as long as Mariota doesn't go back in, he's fine.
Yeah, no doubt. Oh, no, I don't think you have to worry
about
honestly, that. Mariota's not even going to be on the team.
I honestly think
Mariota will be a Patriot. As I heard on local sports radio, they were talking about Mariota.
God, I think I'm switching teams.
New England. Yeah. No, maybe you'll get Jason Garrett as like an offensive coordinator.
I'm going to be honest with you. A.J. Brown's the number 1 wide receiver there now, not Corey Davis.
But they're both really good, man.
I know, but I really think that the way the roles have switched. I think Corey Davis is now your number 2.
So A.J. Brown is more talented than Corey Davis, and I've always felt that way. But that doesn't mean Davis isn't talented. If they could find a way to get both of those guys to click at the same time, and maybe that's this weekend, we'll see. Number 1, the official winner for Rookie of the Year, Fantasy Rookie of the Year. It's pretty difficult. Well, it's becoming less difficult each year, but it's pretty difficult to get a top 10 production out of a rookie running back, John. And you definitely got that out of Josh Jacobs if you had him this year. Josh Jacobs is our Rookie of the Year, 1,150 yards, 7 touchdowns, 20 receptions, 166 yards, so not too much in the receiving game. But I think they're going to work toward doing that a little bit better next year. And all of this was in only 13 games, John. Jacobs is really good. And you were wrong about him, and I was
No,
right.
let me finish. That's what I was going to say. I was completely wrong about this kid. Bite my tongue. I admit my mistake on that one. Also, the other part of it, too. You said he only played, 13 games?
Yeah.
That doesn't count the 2 games he left early.
Right, correct, yeah.
So this kid surprisingly just completely shocked me. I didn't think he had the durability for it. I would love to see a full 16-game season from this kid.
Imagine if Tom Brady and AJ Green are there. How much better
And they
it would
utilized him just a little more. I saw glimpses where the utilization and usage should be there, and the kid surprisingly did very, very well for a rookie.
My problem with Jacobs wasn't with Jacobs. It was the reluctance, it seemed, for a while for them to lean into him. I think they were afraid because his carry count, throughout college was less than you would see some running backs getting one season in the NFL. But as time went on, they seemed to be more comfortable, and he definitely made me happy. I actually ended up trading him in a package to get Julio Jones, but I was pretty pumped about having Josh Jacobs for the short time I had him this year, and unfortunately he'll probably be kept in our league of record next year, but I'll be looking to roster him next year as well. So the next category we have, John, is the coup de grace. It is the number 1 category. It is the fantasy MVP, and there were 3 guys. Like, we both listed them off, one right after the other, because it was just obvious that these were the 3 top guys for this category. The first of which, or the third of which, I guess I'll say, is Shock T. Michael Thomas did the Humpty dance all over opposing defenses this year and actually made Drew Brees better. Michael Thomas was awesome this year, dude. And he, I always thought that he was looked at as a guy that wasn't quite in the league of a Julio Jones or a DeAndre Hopkins or a Devontae Adams. That was the perception, that he was just a sliver of a tier under those guys. And he just knocked that right out of the park this year. The dude had 149 receptions, John, on 185 targets, 9 touchdowns. What a year for Michael Thomas. We had Ernie in our league of record. He has all 3 of our top 3 for the MVP award on his team, and that's why he won. And Michael Thomas was a big part of that.
I mean, Michael Thomas shattered the single-season reception record this year as well. On top of that...
Sorry, I just wanted to jam a little bit more.
On top of that, the guy is just, he just moves the chains consistently. He's, I know they say, oh, he's going to get double-teamed. Even when he got double-teamed, the guy got open. I mean, 1,725 receiving yards. That's disgusting.
The wide receiver 1 for that team was Michael Thomas. The wide receiver 2 for that team was Michael Thomas. And the wide receiver 3 for that team was probably a tie between Jared Cook and Alvin Kamara. He was the only receiver worth owning on that team. And that's part of the reason why, is because he did that well. So I'm not going to play the music again, but number 2, we talked about his ADP. We talked about his output. Lamar Jackson, John, clocked in at number 2 for us. I don't know why I keep saying clocked in. That doesn't make a lot of sense. But he landed at the number 2 spot for fantasy MVP. So that probably gives away who our number 1 is.
Not necessarily, but...
Lamar Jackson, what a huge year for this kid, and what a huge jump that he made this year.
I mean, Lamar Jackson, his ADP, where he was, fantastic year. Nobody would have predicted this. A lot of people did not predict this. 43 overall touchdowns, breaks the single-season rushing yards held by Mike Vick. Just completely shocked the world, but I still didn't think he was good enough to win the award we're going to give it to here. And let's go in the number 1, because
I know you're a big fan of this guy. Well, there's no camera today, but I'll let you take it away. I'm gesturing toward the jersey behind John.
At number 1, Christian McCaffrey for the Carolina Panthers.
1,387 rushing yards. That's an elite year right there for a running back. But that's not all. 1,005 receiving yards, John. That's a great year for a receiver, especially on 116 receptions. You are taking a receiver and a running back. It's almost like Voltron, and you're or like Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, and you're just combining their powers and combining their efforts, and this is the stat line that you get. It was so frustrating to not be a Christian McCaffrey owner this year. especially when you had to go against Christian McCaffrey, because there was nothing you could do. You knew you were 30 points down every single week if you went against Christian McCaffrey.
Christian McCaffrey's floor was like 25.
It's unbelievable. I've never seen anything like it. Even when he performed poorly, I mean, there were some games where he had in the 3 yards of carry range. Even when his quarterback and his team and his offense scored like 10 points, he still got 25. It's like nothing I've ever seen except for the David Johnson year and the LaDainian Tomlinson year.
Tomlinson is the only person ever to score more fantasy points than him. And I think Tomlinson that year, the record was broken, 431 fantasy points. I think McCaffrey was 418, 419. He just missed that record.
And I sat there with a smug look on my face with Bonifant on my bench all year long.
I remember that.
Wringing my hands, waiting for Christian McCaffrey to go down because of the overusage that he was experiencing. And it just never happened. It just never happened. And it was really frustrating. So as awful it is to not own Christian McCaffrey this year, and as easy it is to get resentful about that, you have to celebrate the fact that he had such a good season. And he's a good dude, too. And he works really hard. And he's all about conditioning. He's got a positive attitude. He's a salt-of-the-earth guy. He's somebody your kids can look up to as a sports hero. There's not much better out there than Christian McCaffrey. So congratulations, Mr. McCaffrey, for your Armchair Award for Fantasy MVP. And that's about all we got, Johnny boy. We're doing a quick episode today. We're not going to get into too many extracurricular stuff. We just kind of wanted to buzz through the Armchair Awards, and we'll be back next week. Once again, 2 episodes a week throughout the whole offseason, John. We are here for the long haul, and we're going to have a lot of fun episodes, breaking down a lot of different things, and we hope that you stick with us throughout that process. And that's pretty much it for us, John.
We have a lot of good episodes coming, guys, so make sure you listen. Listen, like, subscribe, share. Come on, guys, we want to get number 1. Okay, I'll settle on number 5.
Number 1.
let's need the Armchair Army to help us
John,
get there.
You're rambling now. I'm going to take this out with our homeboys from Digital Underground, because I still want to hear more of this song. And this one's for you, Shock T.
You're doing, cause I'm about to ruin the image and the style that you're used to. I look
funny, but yo, I'm making money.
So yo world, I hope you're ready for me. Now gather round. I'm
The new fool in town, and my sound's laid down by the underground. I don't know if I can remember all this. My name is Humpty, pronounced with an umpty. Yo, ladies, oh, how I'd like to hump thee. Oh man, that's a great song. When the stereos pump me, I like to rhyme. I like my beats funky, I'm spunky. I like my oatmeal lumpy. I'm sick with this, straight gangsta Mac.
We'll see you guys soon.
Take it easy.
Thank you for listening to the Armchair Fantasy Football Podcast. Thanks for supporting the show. Until next time.